share it with your network. So it is being recorded, so please make note of that. At this time, I have the privilege, the honor to introduce our speakers. And I want to start off with Stephanie Shepard. And we're very grateful for Stephanie. Stephanie, if you don't mind just jumping off of mute and saying hello to those who are tuned in and where you're tuning in from and the organization that you represent.
Yeah, I was not expecting to be the first one to start, but my name is Stephanie Shepard. I am from Pensacola, Florida, and I'm the executive director of Hope Above Fear.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Drop some hand claps in the chat. Give a warm welcome to Stephanie. Thank you so much for being here, Stephanie. I'm going to go over to Justina. I hear you, OG. I'm going to go over to Justina, if you don't mind introducing yourself, where you're tuning in from, and the organization that you represent.
I am Justina Royster from Pensacola, Florida, and I am the owner of Reliable Tax and Financial Services. I am also have the privilege of serving on the board of SSA. Woohoo! I'm the treasurer. And also me and my husband have some other different businesses as well, but I am excited to join you guys tonight.
Thank you so much, Justina. And moving along, we're going to head over to Alicia Tappan. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, hello everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. I'm Alicia Tappan, and I am the founder and CEO of Survivor-Led Solutions. We do anti-human trafficking work here and around the nation.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Alicia. I appreciate it. And moving down the line, we are going to head over to Antonio Royster. Please come off of mute and introduce yourself, my brother.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm just like Alicia. I'm happy for everybody who's tuning in on this most important conversation. Thank you to Storytelling Solutions for putting this on. I am just a guy who wants to see people win. So that's what my Fresh Start Consulting Group is about, where we help people get a fresh start on life, and everybody needs a held hand at times, and that's what we're here to do. I'm also partner, co-founder of E Squared Inc. with my wife, Justina Royster, where we engage, educate, and empower our community through way of community service, through way of just helping people understand money and money management. And I'm just excited to be here to talk about parenting, co-parenting, and how to deal with our teens.
Thank you so much, Antonio. Thank you for being here. Give a warm welcome to Antonio in the chat. We are going to keep it moving. David Magee, if you don't mind coming off of mute and introducing yourself.
Hey, I'm David Magee. I'm based out of Oxford, Mississippi, and I'm just so honored. I'm so proud of the work Abraham does, and I'm so excited hearing. I love Fresh Start and so much of the work so many others of you doing. I've lost a son to an accidental overdose, but I always say don't feel sorry for me. I've got a daughter, years successful in eating disorder recovery. I have another son, years in recovery and sobriety after a near-death experience himself. And I have my own journey. So I write books and I help start a center and an institute at the University of Mississippi. And I'm just on this mission with you all is teens. What we know is mental health is the most equitable diseases and issues humankind knows. What we know, though, is access to help around mental health is not the most equitable, and really trying to help them find solutions through storytelling is something I passionately believe in.
Thank you so much, David. Please give a warm welcome in the chat to David. And we are going to end it with Glenn P. Brooks Jr. Please introduce yourself.
Well, great evening, everybody. My name is Glenn P. Brooks Jr. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a coach. My wife and I created an online relationship academy called the MAPS Academy, Marriages and Parenting Successfully. And we have been showing up and adding value to parents and people who are married for the last 7.5 years. We are authors of 9 books between the two of us, and we're super passionate about helping people build healthy relationships. I think one of the challenges that most parents have is that none of us were ever given a manual on how to do it. And it's the only job on the planet that you really don't know what your score is until after the job is done. And that's a challenge. And so we're here to help people navigate through that process and grow them intentionally. Thanks for having me, Abraham. Proud of you guys, man.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for being here, our featured speakers. I think what we are going to dive in today is going to be extremely valuable. So please give a warm welcome in the chat to Glenn P. Brooks Jr. and all of our speakers who have tuned in to engage in this conversation. I love it. With that said, I want to go around the same line that we started off with our initial question, because in this session, we are talking about building trust and better communication with your team. Now, when we see that title, it can be obvious to some that that is important, maybe not so obvious to others. But I want to hear from each of our speakers why it is important to build trust and better communication with teams. I'll start off with Stephanie.
So trust and open dialogue are the key to helping teens navigate challenges and make informed and healthy decisions. That's truly, that open dialogue and having, I know my daughter and I have done a lot of talk of actually about today, my 15-year-old, and I did a mock interview with her to see what her answers would be, or if she were to answer these as if it was a survey about my parenting, essentially. And what she said in regards to this one was that trust goes both ways. And so her knowing that I trust her allows her to trust me. And that is an area of which we have been really working on over the last about 18 months.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Stephanie. And I love the transparency as we kick things off. What a way to kick it off. I'm going to go over to Justina. When we talk about building trust and better communication with your team, why is this important to you?
I feel like not only teenagers, but kids of all ages, they have to know that you're interested in their lives. They need to know that you care about them, that you're on their side, even if you don't always agree with them. You just communicate with them. I think the communication part is how you build trust, like how you talk to them. Kind of basically you be their good influence versus them getting the outside influence or the influence from the internet or school. I know I'll let my husband share about how my son found out about SEX. So I'll let him tell that story, but be their influence, build that trust so they don't get it from the outside, and just ask them open-ended questions so that they learn how to make those decisions themselves, what they think.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Alicia, I will pass it over to you. Why is this topic, this conversation, important to you?
I'll do mine in little keynote bullets. So if anybody's taking notes, here we go. The first one is an equation, right? Transparency and humility breed trust. That's what we want to be able to do. And if we can be transparent and we can humble ourselves, because we're not always right, even though my kids will tell you that I think I am. The idea is so that we can all have a piece to the puzzle of a conversation. The second thing I think that's really important as it pertains to me is that communication, open communication, is permission, it's connection, and the idea that we can find anything to build rapport off of, and it isn't superficial, but we can really dig in and say, hey, not only like do my kids, hey, you did a good job brushing your hair or whatever. It's more like, do you know how smart you are, right? Do you know how creative you are? Do you know how brave you are? And constantly giving them those affirmations so that when there is trouble, when there is a challenge, they can come because they know that they don't have to seek it in fear. They can actually come with courage. And I think being able to really dig deep with our kids is going to help them make better choices as adults.
Love it. Thanks so much for sharing. Antonio, I am coming over to you. I'd love to hear your perspective on this topic and why it's important to you.
Oh man, I'm the proud father of 5 kids. I did it my way, the best way that I knew how, raising my daughters who are 23 and 22, which really helped me understand way more how to raise the kids that came after them, because at that time it was my way or the highway. And that didn't go too well. You know, we bumped heads a lot. We didn't have an open understanding. And it's very important to have that open door policy with your kids. It's not easy, and it's not going to always go the way that you expect, but it's so important to have that open door policy so that you can locate them where they are. So I really feel like it's important to meet them where they are. And by doing so and, you know, getting along with them, you know, we might be young at our older age, but we have to allow them to see that we are on their side and we can just rock with them. Without that, they will go learn other places. Without that, they will hide a lot of things. And not to say they won't steal, but I just really feel like it's important to just open them up to know that, hey, what the things that you may tell me, I'm not going to hold it against you, because I want to help you grow in this area. I want to help you. Nobody's going to help you like your parents. And I have to allow you to feel comfortable with that. So you have to create those safe spaces, whether it's through Uno, we're going to go take us a bike ride. My thing is the porch, and we'll talk about that later. But it's just so important so they don't get too lost out here in this world. I know we have a long way to go, so we'll talk more about that.
I love it. And I can't wait to dive into the porch. I remember the first time I heard that, it stuck with me, that concept and just idea of the porch. So I'm really looking forward to you sharing that with everyone who's attending. David, I want to hand it over to you. And you started off, you know, sharing the accidental overdose. And I can't imagine, I'm not even a father, so I can't even imagine, you know, being in a situation of that. So I know when we talk about building trust, better communication, being able to gauge where your children are, to have those conversations is very important. So I'd love to hear from you. Why is it important to you?
Oh, thank you. And look, I go back to what a lot of what I've just heard here, and Justina talking about open-ended questions. Somebody told me of a parent of a teen I helped not too long ago. They said, I mean, you're like a teen, a child whisperer or something. How did you do that? And I was like, oh, wow. Well, because I didn't do it before. And with my own son, I was not a child listener. My child began to struggle with substances, and it scared me, and I just kept trying to punish him. We've actually not seen the first evidence of punishment around substances work anywhere. It's he was struggling and self-medicating, and he had a disease. And I needed to ask him those open-ended questions. I needed to listen to his answers. Even if he wasn't ready to give them, I needed to continue to ask and patiently listen. And I think that's how we build trust. And as mentioned, or they will go out and remake on their own, and they will go out. But trust is so vital. It's not about being their best friend. It's about seeing them as having value and not trying to be their boss and just telling them who they will be and who they should be. And I did a lot of that with my late son, William. I thought we had a close relationship. In some ways we did, but when he needed help, as he began to struggle, I was not able to be there for him. And, you know, I've learned we humans are stubborn. We learn the hard way. And so I'm working at it. You know, I'm working at it now with my grown son. I have small grandchildren now, and I get to work with young people around the country. And I just try to hear them more than I'm trying to speak at them.
Thank you so much for sharing, David. And I see in the chat, so many people are saying, you know, the transparency and thank you. And I think that does open up the space for us to have this honest conversation. So thank you all for engaging in that. Glenn, and I'm probably going to end up calling you OG because it just slips out. So if I ever say OG, just know I'm talking about Glenn P. Brooks Jr. We go way back, and I'm very excited to have Glenn here. So Glenn, I want to ask you the same question around building trust and better communication. Why is this topic of conversation important to you?
Yeah, I think because, and thank you so much for what everybody said. I just would have to echo it. I'm just struggling to say something a little bit different. One of the things that I think the reason why trust is so important, it's actually a building block to connection. And if you ever want to lead your kid, you've got to be able to connect to them. John Maxwell wrote a book. He says, everyone communicates, few connect. And the reason why is because there's a lack of trust. People will not follow you if they don't trust you. And that goes for your children as well as your employees, your family, your wife, your significant others. No matter what the relationship is, if you want to ultimately lead someone somewhere, you have got to stop, slow down, and build trust. And I love what some of you all were talking about in terms of this being such a building block. So if you think about a building, trust is one of those foundational things, right? That if it's not there, that building will fall. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And I think that what David said is so true. And I have so many stories, particularly with our son, Justin. He's 30 now. And I remember growing with him and understanding that, you know, or not understanding that I had to win his trust. I had to earn that. I had to, you know, just, and I've often said this in different talks I've done, you know, parents, a lot of times we just think that because we're parents, that automatically gives us a connection. And I often say that parenting is what you get by birth. A relationship is what you get by work. And that trust takes work and it's hard. And you got to be vulnerable. If you're not willing to be vulnerable, I can promise you trust, real trust, solid foundational type trust will never get built, and it'll never be involved in a relationship, and you'll constantly be sort of on this hamster wheel. So no, it's a foundational piece. You got to get that right, because if you don't get that right, the building is off.
Powerful, powerful. Relationship is what you get by work. See somebody just share that in the chat. And sometimes work is messy. Sometimes the work doesn't go as planned. And sometimes we put in the work and don't get the result we were hoping for. But it's work. And that leads me to the next question. And for this question, I actually want to start off with Alicia, if you don't mind. But so many of you already have opened up about, you know, your experiences as it relates to this topic. And I know I can speak for myself when I say I'm not perfect. I've made multiple mistakes. There are things where I did it and then thought about it afterwards, and then I couldn't necessarily come back from it in that moment, but I developed a sense of awareness to make a better decision in the future. And when we talk about parenting, we talk about building trust, better communication. I don't know, maybe some of our speakers here, you know, haven't made any mistakes, but I'd love to hear some of the mistakes that you've made around this, you know, building trust with your children, better communication, some of the mistakes, but then tie it up with some of those lessons that you were able to pull from some of those mistakes. So Alicia, if you don't mind kicking us off with that question.
All right, guys, I will start because I am the master of making mistakes. But like I said, I clean them up really nice so no one ever knows. Number one, I thought, so what you may or may not know, some of you do know on this call, but I'm a survivor of human trafficking. So I have a lot of trauma that I've had to overcome. And first of all, I didn't even think I could physically have children because I'd had surgeries and things from the repercussions of my lifestyle. So when I actually birthed my children, all three boys, I was behind the ball when it came to parenting. I didn't think I could do it, and I didn't know what it was. And so I spent a lot of my own time self-medicating, and I had an issue with the bottle. I would feed the bottle and I would drink from the bottle. And so if that helps kind of resonate, I thought that it was okay to be the mom who has the glass of wine, which I really mean like 2 glasses that turned into a whole bottle of wine that turned into a couple shooters after that. I went to counseling and I was told, you're just stressed. It's okay. Like, we call it mom juice. Let me just say that out loud. And it's not, right? So I had to put myself into rehab, and I had both of my kids were about 5 and 7. And that was really a challenging moment because as a parent, you don't want to show your imperfections, but I knew I had to. I also was a spanker. And I hated that I did that, but I knew I did it because I had control. And that was a thing that in my trauma, I kept losing through being trafficked. And so I was taking it out on my kids. We all know a little bit about the ACE scores. If you don't, there's a study on adverse childhood experiences. And I was physically abusing my kids, thinking that I was being a good parent and reprimanding them. And I knew as soon as I learned about what is trauma-informed care, I had to change. I had to change because I could teach it, I could preach it, but I couldn't do it myself, and I felt like a hypocrite. So I put a lot of work internally so that I could be a better mom for my kids. And I had to apologize to my kids a lot. Not like in the, oh my gosh, mom, so sorry. That's not it. Like, I had to sit down and say, I'm sorry, I was wrong and I need to adjust my behavior. What you did not warrant the way I acted. And now it's pretty cool to see. Now we're talking about 2 and 3 years later, but it's cool to see my own kids be able to sit there and come back to me and say, Mom, I did that wrong. I should have done that better. And just to teach them, again, we go back to vulnerability. We're not perfect parents, and that's not the point. So I learned how to do anger. I think if we can all learn something is how to healthy behaviors of anger and get it out. So I teach my kids to throw ice cubes, to break sticks, to rip up paper, whatever it is, creatively go outside, scream your head off. I don't care. Right. But get it out so that we can have a conversation. And I'm sure, Antonio, I have like an invisible porch. I can't wait to hear the story either, because that's kind of my thing, is not to nag at my kids, but to give them space to talk about what I can do better. So I love that opportunity, and to, like I said, make ugly mistakes. Like, I think I've made them all.
Thank you for sharing, Alicia, and thank you for the transparency. I'll actually keep this one open if there is anyone that is just so excited to answer this question and share some of the mistakes that you've made and a lesson learned. Actually, we'll do this. Maybe one mistake. Let's do one mistake that you've made and a lesson that you were able to learn from that mistake around building trust and effective communication with your children.
Yeah, I'll go. I'm sorry. I didn't think I talked over somebody. Alicia, I just wanted to say thank you so much for displaying for us what it looks like to be a parent leader. Did I jump over somebody? Because if so, I want to make sure that
I think you're good.
Okay. So really quickly, a lesson learned around this area. God, there's so many. So we have 2 children through a blended family. Our oldest is 39. Our youngest is 30. We have 3 grandchildren, 2, 11, and 14. One of the things that I recognize is that I would parent out of fear. And particularly with my oldest, and it's a blended situation. My daughter's had 2 fathers before me, but she calls me dad. And the truth of the matter is that when I met her, I was on a healing journey of becoming the best version of myself, but I wasn't there yet. The grave clothes had not fallen off. I was not delivered from a lot of things, mindset stuff. And the challenge that I had was I wanted to parent without the end in mind. And the truth of the matter is, I would use my circumstances on how I grew up to control her outcomes. And I will never forget when she and I went through a really, really tough period. And she came to me and she said, Dad, what makes you think that I would be the person that you've made me out to be when I've never demonstrated that with you? And so, in other words, what she was saying was, you didn't trust the relationship that we have in order to see the truth that was right in front of your face, because fear was blocking you from doing that. And the biggest lesson that I learned out of that, you guys, is, and for parents that are going through this, what I realize is that in 2024, that's become exponentially harder to pull off because of the distractions. And I want to encourage you. Here's the lesson that I had to learn. I had to learn the idea of emotional intelligence is something that I can actually grow. I may not be able to grow my actual IQ, but I can grow my EQ. I promise you that. And what I had to learn was self-awareness was one step, but the self-management piece had to follow. And so for me, it began this journey of managing. And so I relate so much to what Alicia said, because for years I practiced this idea of saying, you know what, I recognized I did this again. I apologize. This is what I did. This is why I did it. This is what I'm thinking at the time. And this is what I'm going to do to change. And I would put myself on a clock. I would often say in 30 days and 60 days and 90 days, you're going to see a different person, because it would challenge me to change. And that's the biggest gift I think any parent can give a child. And that is the gift of change, for them to watch you evolve on their watch. I'm going to say it again. And this goes for my grown parents. So for my parents who feel like my kids are grown, I don't have any, I screwed it up and I don't have any opportunity to get this back. Here's what I will promise you. Shirley Caesar said this a long time ago: hell is the only place that you can't recover from. In other words, once you die and you bust hell wide open, you ain't recovering from that. If you wake up every day, you get a chance to recover and get a do-over. And what I want to encourage you guys to do is to say, no, this is about me evolving and growing and becoming a different person. So today I'm a very different person than I was. It doesn't mean I'm perfect, but I have learned to go from self-awareness that I did that, it was stupid, to self-management, and then be able to now connect it to social awareness and relationship management. And together that builds the EQ that it takes to be a decent human. And I don't mean a decent father, I mean a decent human. The reason why most people are not decent parents is because they're not decent humans. And if you do that work on your humanity,
He guarantees us. That's exactly what we, I think we lost Glenn.
Are you still there?
Yes, there you go. Okay, good. You're back.
Yeah. I don't know if I checked out at some point, but I'm sorry. Did you guys get all of that?
So where you left off was, if you become a better human, then
you become a better parent or a better husband or a better wife, because the human part came first. I can't be a great dad without and be a horrible human. That doesn't match. Does that make sense?
Makes so much sense. And I think, when we have this conversation about being a parent who can build trust and better communication with your team, that's the place we have to start, is how are we, right? Who are we, right? It starts with the being before we can get to the doing. And I think that's a critical point. Thank you so much for sharing, Glenn. I'd like to open it up if there's anyone else who would like to. Yeah, Antonio, you can dive in.
And go ahead, Tina.
Oh, I'll let you go first, man. Go ahead.
Man, I think it's really dope, to have these kind of conversations, to, higher our education and, what we need to do to move forward to be better people, because there wasn't a book written on this, and there's many books out there now, but when we actually get together and talk, it just feels different. So a little bit about me and my childhood: I didn't have a voice. We went through many things at a young age, domestic violence, and I didn't have a voice. Things happened at school, things happening. I just didn't have a voice. I didn't have an outlet to speak on the things that were going on in my life. I didn't have the mentor to say, hey, what's going on, which motivated me to be the person that I am now. So the mistake that I made was with my children, with my older daughters. God blessed me with custody, me and my wife with custody of them at the ages of 10 and 11. So we went from every time you saw dad, because I didn't get the opportunity to see them much, it was we're playing, we're going on trips, we're having a blast. But then once the kids moved in with us, it was like strict. Everything changed, because now I have to prepare you for this real world. Now I have to prepare you for things that are happening in life. So my biggest mistake was I didn't take the time to listen to my children when they really needed me to listen to them. And I had a voice now. You know why? Because I'm dad. It's going to go my way. This is what it is. I've seen so much, and I want to protect you from so much. And no, I went left on that and just didn't know. So what I actually did was ran my daughters away. Now, hey, they are some beautiful, educated young ladies. My two older daughters, I have one that's in the military. I have one that blessed me with my granddaughter, and she's an amazing mother, but I ran them away. I pushed them away. My oldest one, she was gone 4 months before she graduated, and I didn't know how to feel about that. And then my second oldest, she left on her 18th birthday, and they were gone. But that helped me. And I love the conversation that everybody's having, because I had to go through a healing process as well. Didn't know I was actually going through it. And I felt so alone as I was actually going through it, and frustrated at God at times, like, why am I going through this alone? But he spoke to me, and I needed to go through that alone. I really needed to experience that. So it helped me with my boys. So now that I've been through all these things, I can take my time. I can be patient. I haven't always been this patient person. For everybody who knows me, they see this person. This is a healed person. This is a person who is striving for greatness. I believe in legacy. I believe legacy is in all of us. We just have to go out there and search for it. So I move different now. Me and my wife have been co-parenting and having uncomfortable conversations lately on parenting, which is helping us understand how do we back each other up. And that's so important. I know we have so much more to talk about, but patience comes with experience. You don't just hop off the porch with these things. You have to actually go through life and watch this grow through life. And then you become the person that you need to be for your children, because they need us more. And we'll dive into that later as well, because the school can't teach them. We want the church to teach them. We don't need the streets to teach them. It starts with us, and that takes time. So the question later, I hope we bring up, Abraham, is what are we as parents doing with our time?
Noted, sir. Noted. Thank you so much for, again, just the transparency and what it looks like when we're actually living this thing out. It's messy. It's ugly. There's co-parenting. There's so many things that we didn't necessarily anticipate, but now we have to navigate. So, Justina, I want to hand it over to you as far as maybe share a mistake, a lesson learned around the areas of building trust and effective communication with your children.
Thank you. So I would say a mistake that I made would be gentle parenting, and I'm sure my husband would co-sign on this. I'm sure we all have had that gentle parenting experience where, we want them, I'm not going to say we want them to like us, but we try not to be so hard on them at times. So sometimes it'll come back and bite us, and they'll get disrespectful, or you have to repeat yourself like 3 and 4 times. And it's like, okay, now what do I do? So I think that's been one of my my mistakes is gentle parenting. But I would say one lesson that I've learned about creating a safe space is keeping things that my kids have told me confidential. Because, you know, and I'm sure this is in a lot of households, but I would say in the Black household, you are always told to, you know, whatever state goes on in this house stays in this house, and you don't tell anybody. But I wasn't given a safe space to freely talk to my mom about how I was feeling, or, you know, what I was going through. And then when I would talk to her, she would go tell family members. So that totally dictate, you know, the part of what goes on this house stays on in this house, because she would go and tell other family members. And then that made me not trust her. And then eventually I would stop sharing my thoughts and my feelings with her, and then I would shut down and not tell anybody. So I created that safe space with my kids to, you know, be open, talk. I mean, they talk to me about everything, especially my daughter. Oh my God, she calls me every day about something. But just being able to be open and transparent, like, hey, I didn't have this, but I want you to be able to be open with me so that we can have that great relationship with each other.
So good. So good. Stephanie, please jump in. I see you're off mute.
Yeah. So I just wanted to backtrack and say that. So I have 3 kids, an 11-year-old, a 15-year-old, and my son should be 20, but he died at 18 in October of 22 from fentanyl. And so thank you, David and Alicia, for sharing your hard truths and giving me the courage to do the same. I have often said that my kids have been an experimental project for me. They're all 4.5 years apart. And with each kid, I've learned new things about life. I've become a stronger person, or I've had various different aspects of life change. And as a result, I've had to work on myself continually. It feels like it has been a lifelong process of me always having something new to work on, which is part of growth. And, and I don't think that we're ever done growing. So over the last 20 years of parenting, it just has seemed like a lot of trial and error. And so as far as my biggest mistake, I would say, or not biggest, but one of my mistakes, right, is that I've always told my children, and I'm also a teacher, and so I also use this line with my students, that your mistakes don't define you. However, I wasn't allowing myself that same grace. When I first became a mother of a teenager specifically, I felt like I needed to keep my past mistakes a secret. There was I didn't want transparency. We were very open and honest with one another until he started making mistakes, until he started getting high, until drugs became an issue. I felt like my past he shouldn't know about, because then he could use that against me. Then he might say, well, you did this, mom. And so I became really private about my own personal story, my own personal challenges as a middle school and a high schooler. And that has been, I mean, that definitely did not do our relationship any justice. And so, I put a lot of pressure on myself to be this perfect mom. It was not pressure from the outside world. It was my own internal feeling. From the moment I felt my son move inside of me, I thought that all I wanted in the world was to be the best mom. I was a teen mom. I got pregnant at 16. I had my son at 17, and I was bound and determined to prove the world wrong, that I was going to do this. And, other than that portion of me, my kids really just didn't know about my other struggles. And so over the last 18 months or so, my daughter, my 15-year-old, and I have done so much talking. And I learned that the lesson in that mistake, right, is that kids need to know that we're not perfect. They need to know that we understand the struggles that they're going through. They need to know that, you know, that we made mistakes as teens too. You know, I was a rebellious teenager. We've had these conversations now that I struggled with self-harm, that I had attention-seeking behavior. And those are the things that I started seeing within my daughter. And since we have had those open conversations, all of a sudden she started to see me for me. I was no longer just her mom who had it all together or didn't have it all together, or, you know, was some perfectionist, or, you know, an overachiever. You know, all of a sudden she could relate to me because I related to her. And that has truly revolutionized our relationship. So transparency, openness, honesty. Pretty sure that's what we're here to talk about, right?
Yeah, kudos to you. Abraham, let me say one quick thing really quickly.
Please.
Stephanie, one of the things that in our work that we have seen, and you know, I can tell you, for the parents that are willing to lean into the space of being, and I'm going to say really quickly, there's a huge difference between transparency and vulnerability. Transparency, for those that may not know, is the idea of I will allow you to look in my window. You can see into whatever room that is, if it's the living room, but that's all you can see. Vulnerability says I'll allow you into my house, into that room that you saw in the window, and then give you the freedom to roam around at your leisure and figure stuff out. When a parent does the work that allows them to be first transparent and then vulnerable, I think it changes the game immensely, Stephanie. And I think that if I had a bullhorn, I'd like to shout this to the 8 billion people on this planet. I think that that's a diabolical scheme of the enemy of our, and when I'm talking about the enemy, I'm talking about our culture in this particular case, that robs us of this thinking that says, if I tell them, then they can hold it against me. Well, the truth of the matter is, if you tell them, now they understand that they're not by themselves. And I think that's the biggest challenge that most kids go through. It's this notion of, how can I share this? No one else that I know is going through this, certainly not my parent. So parents, listen to me. If you want to change the dynamic in the room with your kids, do me a huge favor. Begin to dig deep and do the work of becoming the kind of person that can be transparent and then vulnerable, meaning I don't have no cut cards. I don't have any issues. There are no skeletons in my closet. There's nothing. It's like there's a scripture that talks about the devil comes, but he finds no fault in me. In other words, I've given you everything. If you've ever seen that movie 8 Mile with your boy Eminem, at the end, he wins the battle rap. Why? Because he tells the opponent everything there is to know about me. Yeah, I grew up in a trailer. I've been homeless. My mother is on crack. Whatever the case may be, the point is that now what? And what I found out with my son is that it caused him to now deal with reality, because then I'm able to say, okay, so Justin, guess what, buddy? You are 1,000% correct. Now what do we do? Now that that's true, I did this, I wasn't there for you, you're 1,000% correct. Now what do we do? And now it puts the onus on them and puts the ball back in their court. And to me, that's where you begin to see real change, because now they've seen change modeled. And I think that that's the game changer. And if you can do that, it takes work, it takes a community, and that's what we specialize in. But the point I'm making is that until I learned to do that, there was nothing that I could get. My kids had nothing coming because I couldn't be transparent and vulnerable with them, and they didn't have anything to work with. I'm sorry, I went on a tirade, but I am so passionate, Stephanie. If I could hug your neck, girl, listen, I love it. I absolutely love it.
Drop a bomb on yourself for that, sorry about that, Abe, but drop a bomb on yourself for that. And Stephanie, thank you for taking your mask off. Thank you for being vulnerable. And I love how he broke down both, because a lot of times we think something's wrong with us. Hey, parents, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just going through life. You're lifing. And we all have to have this process that we have to go through. We can't avoid it. So thank you for taking your mask off, because I pray that parents and people can pass along this info, because you are not alone. But like he said, like on 8 Mile, once you free yourself from, oh, this is wrong, that is wrong, man, you're free. Can't nobody hold nothing against you. And then you help so many people. And by you taking your mask off tonight, Stephanie, I know we have a long ways to go. You've already blessed people. Thank you.
Powerful. So we're still on mistakes. We're still on lessons learned. So I want to keep it here in case any of our panelists want to share any final things on this before we move on to the next question.
I want to circle just really quick on a story. When I was a teenager and this exact question came up, I asked my dad, do you ever smoke weed? No. Do you ever drink? No. Right then and there, I knew I couldn't tell him anything else. Right? Like I couldn't tell him anything else because I knew it wasn't true. And not that I caught him or anything. They were sober. We didn't have alcohol in the house. But I was getting ready for college and I had all these questions about it. And when I asked those questions and I got the no, then I knew that there was going to be no conversations afterwards. So you triggered that memory in my brain. And I just wanted to like pop the bubble and say, like, I think we've all experienced that, Stephanie. I think we've all, whether we were the kid or the adult in that scenario.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm actually going to head over to David because I had the opportunity to hear your story multiple times, one in person. You visited Pensacola, and then I've seen interviews that you've done on multiple media channels. And I'm so impressed because when you look at David, typically, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, I don't see a man that looks like David being as transparent and vulnerable about his life in the way that he does. And when I saw it for the first time, I immediately was like, I have to know this guy. I have to connect with this guy in a meaningful way because there are so many parents, there are so many adults who, through your transparency, David, I've heard you talk about marital challenges. I've heard you talk about losing your son. I've heard you talk, and this is, you know, with audiences and on channels that everyone can, this is public. And I'm like, wow, I can only imagine how this frees so many people through your transparency. And everyone so far has shared some of the challenges that they've experienced. And it sounds like we're coming to this consensus of when we have these conversations with our children, our teens, and we're teaching them, we're modeling for them what it means to be honest and transparent. It sounds like, from what I'm hearing from each of you so far, is that it starts with us. It starts with us making the decision to become the person who can do the thing. And I know when you have gone through your challenges, David, you made a declaration to yourself that I am going to become a new person, and I am going to become the person who can have these honest and transparent conversations. So, David, can you touch on a little bit, because we have a lot of parents on the call now, and even individuals who work with teenagers, and they're trying to figure out, how do I start these open and honest conversations? And you do this around the country with students. You are the whisperer, you know, in many situations where parents are trying to reach their kids and they can't reach them. And then their children, you know, touch base with you, and now they're opening up, and it's just this awesome opportunity. How do you start the conversation? What information can you share with parents on how to start this open and honest conversation with their teens?
Well, you're so kind, and I appreciate that. And, you know, I'm going to go back to what Glenn said earlier. We have to work at this, and I wasn't born vulnerable. I might have been the most non-vulnerable person. Like when my child, a lot of what I've heard here tonight, I've sat here, I've been making some notes. I do a lot of speaking. Actually, you've assembled such a powerhouse group. I thought to myself, I don't even need to say anything. I'm just listening because they're just right. Everybody's so right. And with me in my house, I would do the same thing. I would have my picture of my children, and in conveying that, I neglected to reveal my vulnerability So they have a hard trouble relating, and it feels more militaristic of my expectations. And I worked very hard. I got there desperately because I'd lost everything. And like my one surviving son, I realized fathers and sons, I mean, we have to work at this. I mean, I need to work at this relationship. And I'll give you an example of practicing it that y'all all made me think about. My 5-year-old grandson, he's 5. And back in the day, I never would have thought that mattered. But as I have learned, and you're so kind to say, I've worked hard at vulnerability in front of many or in front of the one. And I was with my grandson last summer, who was 5, my oldest grandson, at a wedding party, big wedding party, a lot of drinking, a lot of noise. You know what? It's their wedding. They have a right to do it, what's going down. But I'm uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. And my grandson, I think, well, he was fidgeting at the table and he was uncomfortable because he's 5 and he's noisy. And we leave and go to this quiet room and there's nobody there and you can't hear anything in there. And he's 5 and he asked me, I say, oh, I'm so glad we're out of there. And he calls me Dee Dee and he's like, why? Like a 5-year-old. Why, Dee Dee, are you glad you're not there? He's curious. And I'm tasked at that moment, and I've thought of everybody saying what they're saying. I'm tasked at that moment. My instinct as a human is to give him a simple answer. He's 5, but he's my grandson, and I've learned the hard way. And I say, okay, well, I'll just tell you. I'm uncomfortable in there. That's not a healthy place for me in that environment. And I talked to him about adult beverage drinks, and he's like, you're uncomfortable in there because adult drinks make you sick. And I said, that's right. And he just stopped and he stared at me, and it's silent. And on this wedding trip, I'm doing what grandparents do. You know, I'm needing his attention. Hey, don't you love your daddy? You know, we're so demanding and needy of our children and grandchildren. And I kind of realized on the trip, like, I got to just stop that and just be with him. But I give him that answer, and there's this silence. And my 5-year-old grandson gets off of the chair he's facing me on, walks over, and I don't have to ask for his adoration or his attention. He puts his arm around my neck and says, I love you, Dee Dee. And I just think that's a model for communicating with all young people. They can be 2, they can be 5. We're so worried about how we're going to be seen. But really, as so many said it previous before it got to me, if we can let them into our house, then we're on even ground with them, and we have a lot better chance of hearing them and helping them. So I was not that person, and I had my picture of my children, and part of that picture was, since I have my picture, why would I let you into my broken one? You know, let's just make yours perfect. But that doesn't actually exist, you know, and there is no chance that we'll never achieve that for our children, because we can't. So I learned to work at it. And I will close by saying this. You know, when I first started doing a lot of work with young people, first on a university campus, and then it kind of expanded. And I'm not a counselor. They just saw a lot of the work we were doing, building a center, building an institute. So they're struggling. They come to me. Early on, even with students, I would say I would get about 10% of them to counseling. And I really changed with them, even where I did ask them open-ended questions, but when I spoke, I just spoke to them in vulnerability. And then when I needed to call the question on them getting counseling, my rate of getting them in counseling or treatment went up to some just crazy number, like 50%. Young men. I mean, I'd go, okay, well, I'll go see a counselor. It's just something about leveling the playing field, you know?
So good.
Powerful. Thank you so much. And Antonio, I want to, head over to you next because we've all heard the porch, at least, just the name, the porch. And I would love, as we're talking about how do parents start these honest and open conversations with their teens, I'd love to hear your creative approach on first understanding that, hey, sometimes you have to be creative, and sometimes, well, most times now you can't just say, tell me because I'm your daddy, tell me because I'm your mom. Like we have to be creative in order to be effective. And so I'd love to hear from you, Antonio, around having these open and honest conversations with your teen. What information can you share with parents on how to start, how to get that started?
Man, let's go back to my father days when I used to go to my father's house, and I knew I can go over there to get out the house. Like my mom never strict, you got to be in by 11:30. I knew if I go to Pop House, I can hang out to 3 or 4. God rest his soul, man, because I miss him more now than ever. So here's the thing. Back then, he used to tell me, hey, son, put on a condom. But he never told me why. So I'm like, okay, put it on, but you're not telling me why. So as I grew and got older, I've noticed that it's things we can tell our children, but if we don't be open with them and have them understand what we are saying, not just to go with our flow, they won't know. So the porch is the safe space for me and my son, my oldest son, the son that I've been very vulnerable with almost his entire life from the age of 5 up. And I love what my brother over here said. He said, it's amazing. It's almost amazing what kids understand at a young age. So you have to honestly talk to them like young adults. You have to prepare them because everything is sponging to them at such a young age. So that's our space, safe space on the porch. And one day I'm like, hey, let's go on the porch. Let's talk. I said, hey, what's going on in your life? And he was didn't want to tell me much because me and my wife, we had no, you don't need to deal with no girls, stay with the girls. And with me growing up, I knew I was a little fast, in my teenage days. And I do not want my son to be like how I was growing up. So I can be a little hard on him, like, hey, it's almost saying, I don't want you talking to nobody, and that's not right. That's not fair. I'm taking away from his young adult life, his school life that he won't ever get back. So he was in middle school at the time. And I took him to the porch and I said, hey, what's going on? I said, help me help you. He said, what do you mean, Dad? I said, talk to me about something that you would talk to your friends about. I can't do that, Dad. He said, because I talk to my friends, we can be open. And, if I talk to you and Mom, y'all going to get on me. I said, well, I don't want to get on you. I just want to be a part of your world. And if you allow me to do that, I promise I won't throw nothing back in your face. I said, the only time I will have to make my own move is if it's life or death. I said, then I will have to take another step. If it's a friend, I will have to take another step because our lives are important. So if we can help somebody, I want to. He said, well, you promise you won't get mad? I said, no. So we started off this day. He said, well, today, me and a friend were playing on the bus and we end up hitting each other and he pushed me and I landed in some ketchup. And I feel when I get on the bus tomorrow, I have to hit him right away. I said, well, hold on, let's stop for a minute. I said, why do you feel like that? He said, well, because everybody was laughing and I didn't like the way it made me feel. And I'm like, whoa. So I had to take a moment. And we have to understand we have to take moments at times and breathe. Before we just come off with a quick answer and a quick fix. And honestly, sometimes I have to do that. And I'll tell you the second part in a minute. And I was like, well, son, when you get on the bus tomorrow, I said, are you cool with this guy? He said, yeah. He said, we're friends. He said, but he embarrassed me, Dad. He said, I have to do something about it. I said, well, do this for me. I said, when you get on the bus tomorrow, I said, stop at his seat and say, hey, I don't know how we end up putting hands on each other, but let's not do that no more. It was very disrespectful. And I don't want to go there. He came back home energized. He's like, Dad, me and my friend, we're cool. We're good. I said, that's good, son. I said, hey, anytime something feels uncomfortable, just tell me we need to go to the porch. And with young boys, they're very nervous to speak about things around moms. So that's our connection. Hey, do we need to go on the porch? So one day, after an amazing event of It's Okay to Not Be Okay, we split up in groups, and I encourage everybody, especially if you're in the area, it's every third Monday out the month. Storytell Solutions supports it. They're pushing it, and they're pushing it for youth, but it actually helps the adults as well. And I'm big on mask off. That's my brand. And I feel like, it's just a safe space to take your mask off, kind of like how it is with us. And we had great conversations in the groups. So when I got home late that night, I went to the office first, and my wife, they came home. When I got home, we was in there talking. The smile is on his face. Everything's great. I said, hey, son, and what made me ask him, and I haven't asked him about the porch in probably a month. And what made me ask him is because I spoke about the porch at the event. So I said, hey, do we need to go to the porch? And this is how he did. He said, yeah, we need to go to the porch, Dad. I said, okay, cool. And this was just 2 months ago. So we go to the porch, and I sit down, and he rocks my world. And I said, hey, what's going on? I think it's about a girl. And he said, and it was hard for him to get it out. But we are here now. And I want to tell everybody, it doesn't happen right away. You have to be consistent. You have to do it with care and love. And I promise you, men, we need to hug our sons. We need to let them know that we care. We need to give them that space to where, hey, I got you, and it's okay. And finally, he came out with, I said, son, what's going on?
He had to write it down first. Remember, don't forget that part. You asked him to write it down first when he wouldn't tell you.
Oh, well, thank you for helping me out. Come on, Lady of Royster. So he did have to write it down first. And I'm watching him pace back and forth. He's 15 years old. And he says, man, when I got home there, he said, man, I made it to the hallway and I just screamed. And I was so angry and hurt. And I'm like, whoa, like I'm stuck for a second. And sometimes we speak too fast. That was me. I'm growing so much. Thank you, God. And I just stopped and allowed him to talk it out, because sometimes a person's not done talking. They're just trying to get their thoughts together to get it out. And as he's talking, and I'm like, the first thing I said was, where was mom? Like, where was everybody? He said, everybody was still in the garage, getting into the house. I'm like, wow, we just left a great event. Like, what's going on, son? He said, I'm just frustrated. He said, a lot that was said at the It's Okay to Not Be Okay event, it felt like it was directed towards me. And I'm like, wow. So, God uses me. Everything that comes out of me, it comes from my heart. It comes from experiences. So I instantly think, like, what did Abraham say in his group, man? Because I don't know what's happening. And Amari said, Dad, I was in your group. I was like, oh. I said, I promise I didn't direct anything towards you, son. He said, no, it wasn't that. He said, but one thing you said was problems will be there as long as you're running away from them. He said, if you keep running and you look back, they're going to be there, son. So you have to learn to face them and work through them so we can get better. He said, and that stuck with me, Dad, because I'm running from things. I said, what are you running from? Like, y'all can imagine, I'm in a whole nother world right now. I'm like, what are you running from? He said, well, I'm struggling in a class. I said, okay, well, talk to me about the class. He said, I don't understand it. I said, well, did you ask the teacher for help? He said, I asked him for help and he just gives me the answer. So then when I get home, I still don't know how to do it. I'm frustrated, I'm failing, and I don't want to fail. And he's upset in that moment. So I knew this was the trigger for him. I said, well, son, I got up and I hugged him. I said, hey, it's going to be okay. I said, hey, I asked you, did you need a tutor? He said, well, Dad, I said, let me ask you a question. When do you have this class again? He said, honestly, I have it tomorrow. I said, what period? He said, the second one. I said, do me a favor. He said, what's that? I said, when you leave your first class, you power walk to that class. I said, if people try to speak to you, say, hey, I'll catch up with you later. I said, get to the class early. I said, don't wait till it's 30 seconds before a class because the teachers are trying to prepare for this class. I said, son, It's a big responsibility on teachers. So you need to get there early. I said, please do that. He said, okay, I'll do it. I said, get there and say, hey, do you have a moment to talk? Because it's something that's heavy on me. I said, I guarantee you he will give you that opportunity to talk. I said, you tell him I'm scared that I'm going to fail your class. I said, start off like that and tell him what's going on. He didn't even wait till he got home. He texted me and Tina in a group message that we keep up with him in. And he said, Dad, he said, it worked. He said, he explained some things. He said, he showed me exactly how to do it. He said, I got it. He had a 62 in that class. Thank you, God. He had a 62 in that class. And not only did he help my son, he helped others that were struggling too, because it was 8 other kids in there that was not speaking up that they were struggling. He ended that class at the end of this school year that just passed about a month ago with a 93. And we just have to take moments, parents. And me and my mentor were talking about this morning, and we move around so much. We got to get to the money. We got to work. We're so tired from work. So when we come home, we want to relax. We want to pull our phones out. We want to get in social media. I just want to watch TV. And I'm not saying don't get you some time, because you do need decompression time before you rush into things most of the time. But you have to pour more time into these kids because they're depending on us. We fuss at the teachers and we're fussing at everybody else, but they're depending on us to sacrifice our time because they didn't ask to be here. And I've been caught up in this. I've been caught up in my phones. I've been, hey, just go to your room. So guess what's teaching them now? Call of Duty's teaching them on the game. YouTube is teaching them. The phones are teaching them because we're not creating outlets. You know, I have a chessboard over here, checkerboard over here. We love Uno. These are great family time games that can bring you in to have conversation in what we used to do and that we need to start doing again. We've been talking about, but we're not in motion, but I promise you we're going to get back on it. It's presentation day, where I will ask you to give me a presentation of something that you love, whether it's basketball, whether it's drawing. And I want you to speak because I want to teach you to speak well, do better than me. And I have to demonstrate these things. So let's keep up like how we budget. Well, how we're supposed to budget. It's best to write things down because when you see it, you can see it in a different light. But if I just wing it all the time, then I have to remember what I winged. But with notes, you can go back and look at your notes. Let's document our time, parents. Let's see how much time we're giving to the phone, and let's see how much time we're giving to the kids. And speaking of mistakes, Abraham, at one point, my son was almost raising my baby boy. Why? Because they have so much fun together. They go outside together. They want to hang out. And then I came back and went to looking one day, and I'm like, you acting just like your brother. Don't forget, I got a 15 and an 8-year-old. 15-year-old gets a little bit more leverage. They can listen to a few extra songs, even though I like clean versions because some of this music's off the chain. But then I noticed my baby boy is picking up on this stuff. So I'm going hard on my oldest, saying, hey, I got you, you got me. I said, so when I'm not around, I need you to lead by example. I said, son, you'll be gone out the house in 2 years. And then Aiden's here, and I need to make sure he's on point. So I had to dive back into. So for the one who spoke up earlier, and then I'm gonna come off of this because I need to pass the mic. For the one who spoke up earlier, I think it was Stephanie. I'm not sure if it was Stephanie or was somebody else. When you said you had to apologize, ooh, that is so deep. You taught your child that it's okay to be wrong. You taught your child that it's okay to have to learn and have to be honest about some things. I had to apologize to my 8-year-old in a family meeting 2 months ago. I said, hey, I've been caught up in work and caught up in this and caught up in that. I said, son, I'm locked in. I said, but this may be a little harsh on you because it's going to be a different. I don't like the TV on all the time. I want to monitor how much time you're giving to your TV or to your game, how much time you're giving to reading your book. You know, when we get on a road trip, our favorite thing to do is to pass back the iPad because the iPad keeps them busy. No, I want you to read. I want to work on spelling words. So I challenge my son when we walk to the bus, I just throw out all kind of words to him. And he gets excited when he gets these words correct. This is school before school. Parents, we are the school. And we have to continue to learn. So getting with these professionals that are on the screen right now and getting with your group friends, instead of let's hit in the club tonight, let's get together and just talk about these kids and what has happened. And let's be honest. And I love what you said, Tina, because I was a victim of this. My daughters would do something and I would tell everybody in the family. Let's cut back on that. Let's give that time and energy back to the kids, or have safe spaces with parents so we can help each other grow. I hope this helps somebody, but I can talk a lot. Abraham, take the mic.
Powerful. And one thing that I want to bring awareness to that Antonio didn't say, but if you were paying attention, you caught it. And it is the fact that his son is having these conversations. He's speaking up. He's not suppressing those things that he's experiencing. And one of the reasons he's able to do that is because Antonio has become a safe person. And sometimes when we talk about safe spaces, being a safe person, as parents, mistakes happen. And sometimes we have to apologize. Sometimes we have to repair broken trust. And I want to come over to Glenn, and then I'm going to come over to David, because I want you guys to explain to those who are listening. When we talk about becoming a safe person, one that our teenager, a young person, feels comfortable even speaking to. How do you become that safe person? And if you can, we do have a few more questions, and I want to get as many questions in as we can. So please share some of that and some of the things that you've done. And Glenn, I know you coach parents, you coach individuals in relationship. And so as an expert in this field, I love to hear when we talk about becoming that safe person that our teen looks at and says, I could talk to dad, I could talk to mom about this very hard thing that I'm experiencing, about these emotions that I can't necessarily articulate. How do you become that safe person? I'll start with Glenn.
Yeah, Abraham, I think that it starts with you, first of all, recognizing that you're unsafe. I think it starts right there. And I think that a parent has to come to a point where they realize they may not call it safe or unsafe, but they realize that what they're doing is not working. And I think that that level of self-awareness will breed a certain amount of attention that you'll give yourself on, what do I do to fix this? Let me just cut to the chase. There is a book that we have taught from. We coach people through. I'll just give you the cliff notes. It's called Safe People. If you've never read it, you should go read it. Every parent in America should read this book. I don't get paid a dime for you going to get it. It's written by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. They are the famous authors of the famous series on boundaries. One of the things, to answer your question directly, because I can tell you statistically, 3/4 of this room will not go do what I just told them. So let's start there. So the self-awareness is, I need to fix this. I just gave you a solution as to how to become a safe person. Go spend $20, get that book and read it. And I guarantee you at the end, it's going to give you some very practical steps on how to do that. The other thing that I want to tell you, just from a real practical standpoint, I think that you have to give people permission to speak into your blind spots. If you think about when we're riding in a car, rarely do we allow people to backseat drive. Right. And the reason is because it is annoying for one and distracting for the other. But what would it look like if I gave you permission to speak to what's in my blind spot? We all know that a blind spot is a place around a car where the mirrors don't quite catch it and you can't quite see it. And for a nanosecond, there's nothing there, although there could be something there. And what we know is if you ignore it, you'll have an accident. Well, there are some mistakes as parents we don't get to make twice. There's some mistakes that they're absolutely are permanent. And one of the things that I often do is I give people who are really close to me, who are safe people, permission to speak into my blind spots. And it's an area I just don't see. And I think that when I'm moving in unsafe behavior, when I'm dealing in my community and I'm giving permission to somebody that says, listen, I got a challenge in this area, this area, this area. When you see me moving unsafe, I need you to let me know what time it is. I need you to gently remind me, just like the Roysters just did that. But, my man was going and she was like, hey, slow down, pump your brakes, big dog, pump your. You got to go back and talk about the right now. He gave her permission to speak into his blind spot. As a result, we all got blessed. Does that make sense? He didn't push back. There was no defensiveness. There was no, listen, I got this. Listen, if you can do that, I think it changes everything. So the bottom line is understand and recognize when you are moving and basically when we're talking about safe, you move in a toxic way. What what you put your hands to do withers. It doesn't grow. That's how you know you're unsafe. If you have people that are repelled around you, they don't like to open up and share. Parents, listen to me very carefully. If you have to tell your kids, you can tell me everything, you're not safe. Hear me very clearly. If you have to open your lips and say to your child, baby, but mommy loves you, daddy loves you, can tell me anything. If you have to articulate that, you are not safe. Because if you were, they would be talking to you. Does that make sense? That you wouldn't have to declare it. It's like the leader who says, I'm the leader. Now, guess what? We all know that you're taking a long walk. There's no one following. You get what I'm saying? So the point I want to help you guys understand as parents, you have to first recognize that something ain't right. This ain't working. And then secondly, what do I do to go fix it? I just dropped it in, and there's some people in the MAPS Relationship Academy. Marsha, do me a favor. Go help some people out and go find the link and put it in the chat so that there's no reason for you to forget, and click the link, go buy the book. I get nothing from this.
It's in the chat, Coach.
There we go. See, that's because I've trained to, you see how she understands the assignment. I didn't even have to, listen. So I hope that helps, Abraham.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I already see we got at least one person that got the book already, and they got it for a discount thanks to Prime. But I want to bring it over to David, because you speak to young people across the country. And I know geographically, based on where you are, maybe there is a cultural dynamic that, certain barriers that exist, but for some reason, you're still able to be the safe person enough for this young person to open up with you. How do you become that safe person? There's a lot of parents on the call right now on this Zoom, and they're taking notes and they're looking for different ways that they can apply this information. How do you become that safe person?
Well, I ordered the book as well, and I've actually seen that book before and never have purchased it, but it's on its way now as we speak, probably. But so I'll give a very short answer that really just illustrates a little bit about what Glenn said. Ego is a barrier. Ego makes us unsafe. I think the example of, you can tell me everything, or what parents say to me is, well, I mean, I know everything about my child and what they're doing. And I go, oh, you do, huh? That I probably hear that from 90% of parents. I mean, I know what they're up to. I mean, I was around. I'm like, oh, things haven't changed, because I think they have. And one thing that hasn't changed is that young people and older people, but young people even more so, have a difficulty expressing themselves because they often feel unsafe with their own feelings. And so to be safe for them, it requires us putting our ego aside. And that takes some work, and it takes some growth. And when your ego is aside, then you can become safe to them, because they can maybe tell you what you don't necessarily want to hear. And that becomes a safe environment, when they can actually do that. And ego is one of the greatest human failings. And you would think we wouldn't flaunt it on children like we do, but we do. And often it comes from parents.
So good. And I think when you talk about what it looks like to be safe, and Glenn so clearly articulated how to practically look at ourselves and identify if we are unsafe. I love the analogy that you use, Glenn, that if you have to, tell your teen, tell your child, tell anyone, you can tell me everything, then that's a sign that maybe I have to say this because I'm an unsafe person. And I think a lot of being that safe person, right, has to do with communicate, how we communication. And majority of communication is actually listening, and it's nonverbal, it's in our body language. So many times when we think about having these honest and open conversations with teens, it can be something as, quote, simple as they share information and we gasp, like, oh my gosh, or we flinch, or we say a specific word that they may not say in that moment, but in their minds, they make the decision that I cannot tell mom or dad anything like this again. And so a lot of it has to do with communication, right? And how we are safe. And not just verbal communication, but nonverbal communication. Alicia, I'd love for you to touch on language, because language plays a big role. And sometimes it's those things that we say that make us unsafe, and it's harder to come back from those things. So can you touch a little bit on that as it relates to becoming a safe person?
Yes. So one of the things that I train in trauma-informed care is reactive parenting and the use of coercive language. And we probably have all heard, you don't want to react, you need to respond. And that is that take a couple breaths before you say and filter what you're going to say. One of my life mission work is really changing anything I say into affirmations or positive language. So even something where it's like, oh, this is hard, I can't do it. No, hold on. I'm having a challenge and I need some help, right? Somebody asked me the other day, well, what's the opposite of not giving up? And I said, well, what do you think it is? And they said, keep going. And I said, I don't know. I think that leads to burnout. I said, maybe not giving up is actually surrendering, not in your own strength, but getting help. So there are 8 coercive languages that we all do. We are all subject to doing these at least once, or not every day. The first one is questioning with our teens, questioning in like a rhetorical sense, meaning that you're not really expecting the answer. So if they say, they said, my math teacher's dumb, and you go back, what did you say? What did we talk about? Didn't I tell you not to say that? You're not giving them an opportunity to express any emotions. We're shutting them down. So rhetorical questions typically will hinder further conversation. The second one is arguing. We all know we don't want to fight with our kids. They are masters. They know us. They know how to push our buttons better than we know how to push theirs, right? They learned from the inside. So arguing really just puts more attention on the negative conversation instead of trying to find a solution. If you're constantly focused on a problem, you're not looking for the bigger picture solution oriented conversation. The third one, which I don't know who was here from the North, but I moved from Michigan. And so sarcasm is our first language. I don't know if you're fluent, but I am. And it doesn't work, especially with trauma and kids under 7. I know we're talking about teenagers, but I just want to highlight that the brain doesn't actually process sarcasm. So when you are making fun of something that they're wearing, or, did you do something that they said and you just sort of mock them? I had a teenager tell me, well, you're just talking smart to me, talking smart. And I realized in that moment, she could not comprehend what I'm actually saying. And I was telling a joke, but it wasn't funny and it wasn't processing to her, even if I thought it was relevant, right? Because we do want to build rapport. It's not to say you can't joke around with kids. It's just in the moment when we're trying to have a conversation or be serious about something, sarcasm goes out the window. Get rid of it. The next one is force. when we're verbally forcing somebody. This was a conversation that I had actually during one of my trafficking situations, but I was told and backed into a corner, you're too drunk to drive, you can't go anywhere. And I said, you know, when I do this training, if I had said that in a different tone, hey, you're too drunk to drive, you can't go anywhere, versus forcing that conversation, that verbal, you're going to do this, the tone gets misconstrued if I'm trying to help somebody. So watching your tone, but then also, you know, if you're trying to get somebody to do something, the best way to do it is to make it their idea. So it's not necessarily you need to do this, if you do this, then you'll get this consequence, punishment. It's really providing opportunities, asking questions so that the light bulb goes off in their brain and they make it their idea to get them to do the thing you're looking for. I do that with like the dishes specifically. Did you enjoy having clean dishes? Okay, so do you think maybe you could see the benefit of helping me out doing the dishes? Or do I need to sit here and do them all myself and then we can't do something that you would like to do together? So I really do try to ask my kids questions in a way that makes sense to them. Threats, the warning of a negative consequence. We talk about verbal force. Threats are another indicator that we're not getting what we want, right? Worst case scenario parenting. And I'm sorry, Mom, if you're listening, but it was awful when it was always like, and then you're going to die, right? Like, oh, if you go to that party or if you do this and then you're going to die, right? And I just never could take the seriousness of like what she was actually trying to tell me, which might have been there's a negative consequence to what you're doing, or it could be risky. Instead, it was just like this full on, and then I'm going to die, so I might as well not try it, which I will tell you, typically 9 times out of 10 will always make that kid want to go try it then, just to prove you wrong, right? Thanks. Right? So threats and negative verbal force, they don't work. Number 6 is criticism. We have to be able to constructively criticize our children's behaviors. But if we go instantly into, man, you know, that looks like chicken scratch, you should just erase it all and start all over. Or, you know, did you even try? Like, instead, recognize if it's not perfect in the task that you're trying to get them to do, or something. I appreciate the homework conversation or talking to the teacher. You did a great job, Antonio, displaying that. Criticism is always going to put that person down. So if you can find a way to encourage them, right? Hey, I noticed you tried really hard on that math. I can't really read it, so I'm just going to suggest maybe we do it together and you've cleaned it up a little bit, right? Like, you can do it a different way. That wasn't a great example, but you don't want to say what is wrong. You want to offer opportunities to make it right. Despair. I caught myself doing this one, y'all, and I was so embarrassed. I had to like put my hand over my mouth. Despair. And I told my husband this, and he actually gets it. Your kids do not give a crap what you did all day. So when you come home and you're like, man, don't you know how hard I worked? Don't you know how tired I am? Don't you know? No, they don't have any idea what you did at work today or how hard you worked on something or whatever, right? So if you say something to make them change just because they feel sorry for you, you're just instilling more guilt and doubt and shame, and not instilling the empowerment and choice making and giving them that voice. So when you are tired and need help, that's what you say. Hey, buddy, I really need help right now on making dinner. Can you set the table? Just being very specific, right? You can ask for help. Parents can ask for help. And then the last one is logic. Logic is my favorite one because most men, right, specifically are logical in their thinking. Women are emotional. So we instantly go into like the vegetable conversation or why you shouldn't do something. Drugs are bad. Okay, that's not enough. If we spend so much time being logical about what we want to accomplish, we're missing the mark and giving a lot of attention to the problem and not really offering solutions. So, you know, it's one thing I loved, David, I think it was you that talked about those drinks that make you sick, right? My kids know that conversation too. And I've been telling them things since they were little, and not because I'm right and not because I'm mom, but hey, you can do the research yourself. Do you want to look at this video? You want to read this thing with me so we can see what this really is? My kids know you can't drink Coca-Cola, not because it's bad for you, but because they know what's in it. And they're like, well, that doesn't sound good. Why would you clean a toilet with this? Right? So it's not to say because I said it's bad for you, it's because they've done their own research with us and now they know for their own decision making what they like and what they don't like. So those are just some of the coercive languages, and I'm happy to share more about that, but I think it's important to recognize what we shouldn't say and try to find ways to say it better.
So good. And I love how we started off this conversation with such transparency. And now we're in a space of the conversation where we're getting very practical and we're providing information, whether it's books or language or tips and strategies that you as a parent or you as an individual who works with teens in some capacity, you can take and you can implement. And that's really our goal around this conversation. So if this has been helpful and valuable for you so far, drop a 7 in the chat. Show our speakers some love. Drop a 7 in the chat. Show us some love. Show them some love. So I want to actually come over to Justina because I've had the privilege of knowing Team Royster, Justina, Antonio Royster for some years. And one thing, and I'm sure I've told him this multiple times, is I watch them. When they parent in real life, I observe. I pay attention because there are certain things that I catch. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I want to have the opportunity to implement some of what I see them do. And when we talk about being a safe person and even recovering from maybe doing things that have made us unsafe, a big part of this conversation is effective communication. So, Justina, if you don't mind sharing either an example or just your perspective around effective communication with your team. How do you go about having these conversations and not just speaking and talking to your children, but ensuring that it is effective? They're hearing what you're saying, they're listening, they're understanding, you're communicating what needs to be communicated, and there's this dialogue where your child can leave the conversation and be in a position to take action. How do you go about having these conversations and specifically effective communication with your team?
I think my husband would agree. I would say effective communication involves listening to understand versus just listening, like, and asking those open-ended questions to build their trust, to get their perspective. Even when we talk to them, we always say, well, what did you get from that? Or did you understand what I was saying? He even does that with me. Okay, babe. So after I talked, like, we just talked about this in the car and I kind of got mad. He was like, so what did you understand about what we talked about last night about parenting? I'm like, oh, here we go. Because sometimes he make me feel like I'm the child, So I'm like, okay, well, let me tell you, what I got from our parenting conversation and how, we need to spend more learning time with them. And, because we'll have them go read their books or, do whatever. But then sometimes we don't circle back and say, hey, tell me what you read, or tell me how you felt about this book, or tell me about the character, or whatever. So I would say that's how we effectively communicate, is after we talk to them, we ask them questions about how did they understand and how did it make them feel.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Justina. And to be able to see it in action is always a pleasure, because when I see you navigate with your children, they speak and then they listen, right? And sometimes we see the opposite, which is they speak and they don't listen, right? And so I know that is built over time, and there's intentionality with being able to develop, effective communication with your team. I actually want to, okay, Antonio, jump in there.
Just to piggyback off what she said, I think we as parents, as people, as humans, we just can't avoid the work part. You have to continuously work at this thing, and it may not come out how you want it to the first 100 times, but you have to be very consistent in it. What is that saying? You're not supposed to be your child's best friend. Well, we got to be friends somewhere in this mix, because I need you to understand what I'm saying and know why I'm saying it. And for the people who feel like you may be getting on your children's nerves, it's okay. Get on their nerves, but get on their nerves with love too. Don't forget about the love part. We don't like to yell. I don't like to yell at my children. I'll give a look like, I know you didn't do that, but I love what Abe said, because a lot of times you don't have people giving you feedback on how you move. We just move in the best direction that we can, and that we practice. So if you're going to tell them one thing, yet do another, you're going to lose your safe space. You can't tell them this and then they watch you do something else, but you told me to do this, but you're not doing it. And the favorite thing that we use is, well, I'm the parent, I'm the adult, I pay the bills, I do this. So I just want to make sure that we understand that there's work involved in this, and it gets a little frustrating at times, but you have to keep going for them. That's all I want to say. Good job, team.
Love it. Love it. So we are getting close to time, and I want to do a round robin. We are getting close to time, and I want to do a round robin. Oh. And I want to do a round robin because there's a lot of parents that are listening, whether they're on Zoom now. I see people are watching via Facebook Live, and they're hearing this information, and it's great information. But it can be a little overwhelming. It can be information that causes them to think, well, I don't want to maybe approach this conversation in such a way that I lose the respect of my child, that now I'm their friend and I don't have any authority over whether I can provide sound information that they can actually take to guide them on their journey. And so when we talk about being vulnerable, we talk about being transparent. There are some people who are listening to this and they're saying, well, that sounds good, but will I lose my authority? Will I lose my respect? And I want to start off with Stephanie, and then we're actually going to go around. And I'd love to hear some of your comments, some of your thoughts on just that concept of being transparent, being vulnerable, and this idea that we may lose respect, may lose authority as a parent. And then specifically, if anyone wants to touch a little bit on boundaries. And so because I'm looking at the time and I see we have to end at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, if you can keep it to 60 or 60 up to 2 minutes, maybe we'll try to keep it to 60 seconds. 60 seconds. But please provide some insight on that. Stephanie, we'll start with you.
I feel like you gave multiple things to provide insight on, but I'm going to try to keep it in 6 seconds. So here we go. So like I had said at the beginning, I had talked with my daughter about some of the questions that you had asked. And I did want to just speak from a teenager's mouth. I was writing down the notes of what she had said, and there were 3 quotes that she stated that I thought were so powerful. And one is that honesty does not equal consequences. And then that is something that a child, a teenager needs to know, that when they are honest, they are not going to be punished. That she also said that when parents give advice rather than lecture, they can be heard. And so, so that the listening, right, which has been a common theme among everybody, listening, not just hearing that there are words, being spoken, but actually stopping to listen. That is a concept that I have genuinely been working on for years, but it hit me like smack in my face when I would drive home from school after a busy day, and the kids were in the car and they were talking to me about their day, and I'm hearing them, but I am not listening to a word that they're saying. I am just giving them, ears for them to talk to. And one day my daughter spoke up, and she called me out on it. And she point blank said, well, why am I going to talk to you? You're not ever listening. And I have been busting my butt to remedy that. And she has said that she has seen it, and now she talks to me. Paying attention to the body language, like Alicia was saying, that the facial expressions, they not only do that to us, but it's important for us to do that for them, to see how it is that they get in the car. Are they saying that they're okay, but their body language and their face says something completely different? And then, giving them maybe time to just decompress before broaching that topic, or diving right in and asking them, like, what's going on? So much can be learned when we just actually stop and listen. I feel like I have so much more that I could say, but I know I've already exceeded my 60 seconds, so I'll stop.
You actually took 30 seconds from I'm just kidding.
I was like, wait,
No.
I can keep going.
No. Thank you so much. And that's so powerful, listening. And that's a skill that needs to be developed, right? We don't just come out the womb knowing how to listen. So thank you so much for sharing that, Stephanie. Antonio, can you dive into this and give us the brief version, please, sir?
Well, actually, I just want to read something. I want to touch on the boundaries. I think that's the last thing you spoke of. And, we all have our own definitions, but I just want to dive into something. Me and Mentor, we be talking. And Abe, you already know what time it is when we get to that, though. But boundaries, and this is for parents, and you move how you need to move off of it, but just for us humans in general. Boundaries is a form of self-care. So pause on that for a minute, before we go any further. But boundaries is a form of self-care. Boundaries helps to create a clear guideline or rules and limits of how you would like to be treated. They let others know what it is and what is not okay or acceptable. Boundaries honors our needs and wants so that we feel respected and safe. That's my 30 seconds. Now somebody gets an extra 30 seconds. Boundaries is so important for yourself, and it's important for us to teach our children about boundaries as well, because as they go out into the world each and every day, boundaries is something they need to understand, so they'll know that no one else can cross these boundaries. And if I feel uncomfortable, I may talk to my parents about this, because we have this safe space and understanding, and they want my best at heart. So boundaries.
Thank you so much. Alicia, please dive in.
I love that you did boundaries, because I always teach that they're instruction guides on how we treat each other. They're not walls, right? So break down the walls to keep your respect. My biggest go-to is still that I am the parent, right? And I tell my kids all the time, like, it's okay to just be the kid. Like, it's okay to just be a kid right now, because I want you to make mistakes and I want to be able to walk with you through them. We talked about the dynamic of the older parenting the younger kid and the assimilation that happens. And I had to talk to my sons about that too. Like, it's okay for you to just be his brother, like be his best friend, because I need to be able to navigate when things go awry. And so I think my kids really do respect that piece. It's when they start pitting the parent against the parent. And I know we didn't talk about that at all, but I think it's worth just mentioning that, going back to boundaries, right? This is my personal space. This is your personal space. And if we don't have permission to cross it, we don't do that. And just having those conversations from a young age all the way through, not being afraid to have the whole lifespan conversation as little kids to teenagers, so that it's not a shock or a surprise, or we're getting trained by a third party that we don't necessarily agree with.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Justina, I am going to pass the mic over to you.
I think with boundaries, consistency is a crucial part when it comes to setting boundaries. And I would say setting those boundaries with love and being consistent, like ensuring that the rules and expectations are enforced, but being consistent with that, so that they understand, like, okay, I know the rules, but it's all in love. Like, you're not going to reprimand them or anything like that for the things they do, because they know those boundaries. And I know both parents have different parenting styles, and I raise my hand. But as long as you stay consistent with that, then they'll keep that going throughout life.
Consistency. I love it. Thank you so much. David, please, share some comments on this.
Yeah, I'll just give a short, easy one. Seeing children and hearing them is vital. Also, in a parent world, just like for parents, no is a powerful word, and no doesn't always have to mean conflict. Sometimes it's just no, and that fits into the boundaries piece. But you don't have to give up the authority. You can still see them and hear them, but sometimes the world is no. The word is no, because we live in worlds where in the workplace, or I face no's all day long, and none of us get to work outside or live outside any boundaries. And we can't fear that with our children. That doesn't cut us off from being able to see them and hear them and ask them open-ended questions. Sometimes we can ask them an open-ended question later on. How did it feel when I told you no?
That's so good. So good. Thank you all for sharing. And Glenn, I am going to have you wrap it up. Please share your comments on this.
Really quickly, guys, a couple of quick practical steps. Marsha already put it in the link. Just as a practical backstory, I started reading the book Boundaries more than 20 years ago. You need to get the book. It's an entire series. Starts with Boundaries with Children. Same authors of Safe People, Henry Cloud, John Townsend. I'm a huge fan. I've created workshops based on this information. We call it broken fences. And let me just give you a quick rundown. Boundaries by nature are designed to create freedom. And let me help you understand what I mean by that. When boundaries are properly set, it creates a level of freedom that you know where you operate in, and that's a safe space, and that's your space. So I'll give you a quick example. If a dog is out back on a leash, he is tied up and he doesn't have but so much space he can cover. But if you take the leash off and you let him go in a fenced-in area, he has the freedom to roam the yard. Those are two different types of situations. What we do is we try to hold our children on leashes as opposed to building a fence and giving them space to be able to create and be themselves. And let me speak really quickly to the idea of I'm the parent, not your friend. I think that the sentiment of that back in the day is that I'm not supposed to agree with you. But here's what it doesn't say. I may be your parent and not your friend in terms of your peer, but I can be friendly. I can create an environment where we can talk, where you feel like, you know what, I'm a safe person for you to share with. And I think that those are very different things. And so I want to encourage parents not to find themselves dogmatically holding on to this idea that, and this is where that fear-based parenting came from. I'm your parent, not your friend, because I was your age once. And that's just simply not true. I've never been 16 in 2024, neither of you. And so we need to change our language, guys. Does that make sense? What you're really saying is, I feel you. I understand what it's like to get my heart broken. I understand what it's like to fail a test. Then let's lead with that, as opposed to giving them something where they will dig in and now fight you over, as opposed to embrace. So again, to go back to boundaries very quickly, I love what Alicia said. They are not walls. They are not concrete barriers. They're actually fences that have egresses. They're designed so that you know where my responsibility stops and yours starts. And in relationship, unlike property, they become very blurred very easily. And so this is why they have to be maintained. If you don't, they will look like broken fences and people come and go. And now you are caring for something that ain't your business. There are some things that my kids are doing that is none of my business. That is your business. Come to me because you are getting ready to, you have a project due tomorrow. You knew about this at the beginning of the semester. Now, the boundary that I have is set is that if you come to me that late, you bear the responsibility of this. And this is what we got to stop doing, guys. Stop robbing our kids of the consequences that are designed to challenge and change them in safe country. Because if they don't get challenged and they don't change in safe country, now you let them outside of your world, and now they're left to the world defenseless because they've never developed what it looks like to have to own that F because I dragged my feet. Because I'm not doing your work. I can guarantee you that is an F that you will proudly own. And we can sit and talk about how that felt afterwards, but I'm not doing your work because that doesn't teach and train you anything. I hope that helps. I know I went a little bit above my 60 seconds, but get the book. The purpose is not, guys, boundaries have never been designed to weaponize them. That's a whole talk I could do. We have found ourselves in a culture where we are weaponizing our boundary, and we're calling it, I need to be able to care for myself to the non-caring of you. And that's not what that means. I'm supposed to care for both of us. And if I build this thing right, it'll work. I hope that helps.
Wow. Wow. Powerful. With that said, everyone, we are getting close to the hour, and man, my heart right now is so full. And one thing I'm thinking about is the fact that this is recorded, and those who weren't able to make it will be able to watch it, and those who watched it can rewatch it and write the books down and take the notes. This is amazing. So thank you so much to our speakers for sharing from your heart, your experience, your expertise. Please, those of you who are with us, whether you are on Facebook Live or right here in the Zoom, scan the QR code or hit the link in the chat. We're going to share the link in the chat, and we want to hear your feedback. How was this session for you? What were your thoughts? What are some things that were impactful? And then what are some areas where we can improve? Maybe some topics that you'd like to hear in the future. But please, please, please hit that link in the chat and share your feedback. While you are doing that, I'm going to give you give you some time to do that. But I also want to share a few upcoming events that we have for Storytelling Solutions of America, SSA. And as I mentioned earlier, our mission is to be a launching pad for teaching youth to share their story and access mental health care through the art and skill of public speaking. And so a big part of being able to empower our youth is to ensure that parents have the skills, the tools, the information necessary to be safe people and to keep these conversations going. And so that was one of the big reasons why we had this event. And my hope is that it was extremely valuable for you. But one of the events that I wanted to bring to your attention, especially those who are in Northwest Florida, if you're in Pensacola area, this is for you. We actually also have David Magee, who is coming to town for this event, July 18th. It is our bingo fundraiser night for Storytelling Solutions of America. For those of you who have been keeping up with the work at SSA, you know that we do an annual Youth Mental Health Summit. This year is our first, and we're bringing together 200 teenagers across the Panhandle to learn about mental health in a fun environment. And so the night before the summit, July 18th, we have David Magee, who is going to be our keynote speaker. So if you loved what you received here, come and meet him in person. July 18th, we have Sunshine from Sunshine's Corner on Blab TV, who is our MC for the night. We have Conchita's Catering, who is providing fantastic finger foods. Mrs. Jones Cold Brew, who is going to be providing drinks for the night, non-alcoholic drinks for the night. We're going to have a great time. We're going to play bingo, and we are going to be discussing mental health in an environment that is conducive for growth. A couple of things that we've been working on as an organization, our teens have created a mural that represents youth mental health. They were tasked with the opportunity to define what mental health means to them, and they have created this beautiful mural that we will reveal on July 18th. So make sure you get your tickets. It is live right now on Eventbrite, and you can go to the link that you see here on the screen to get your tickets and to learn more information. The next event, which I kind of alluded to already, is our Youth Mental Health Summit, which happens the day after. This event is for teens, 13 to 18 years old, and we want to bring together teens for a day of edutainment. We are flying out a few speakers. One, the founder of the National Suicide Hotline is coming to share his story and why it's important to have these conversations. We also have the teens who have been through our public speaking training program over the last few months, and they've learned to hone in on their own mental health stories. They've pulled lessons from their stories, and they will be our keynote speakers on July 19th. So if you are a parent and you have a teenager, 13 to 18 years old, get your tickets right now. And here's the other cool thing. We've had a lot of great sponsors who have reached out and said, hey, I want to provide a scholarship for teens who are not able to afford the ticket cost. So we have upwards up to at least 20 scholarships available. So if you are a parent of a teen, you know a teen that you work with, I see we have some teachers in the room as well that you want to get them plugged in. Reach out. We have a scholarship application form to have you fill that out and receive your ticket. So we want to see you on July 18th. We want to see your teens on July 19th. Feedback form. But again, we are a local nonprofit organization. And so we're able to keep this work going. You heard Antonio mention earlier, our monthly event called It's Okay to Not Be Okay happens every single month. It's open to the community, free food, games, opportunities to connect. Over the last couple of months, we even gave away things like TVs, right? And so it's a really good opportunity where our community comes together to have these important discussions. So we want to get you plugged into that, as well as the other events that we have. To run these things, as I was mentioning, it takes funding, right? And so actually we have a goal of $12,000 for this year's Youth Mental Health Summit. We are just over 40% towards that goal. So if you know someone or if you yourself would like to donate towards that, we have the link in the chat as well to join the mission of SSA. With that being said, we are just a few minutes over time. I will be reaching out to you with a follow-up email to share information on how you can connect with our dynamic speakers today. There's so much information that they shared today, but there's more where that came from. I encourage you, reach out to each of these individuals to learn about what they are doing and how they can support you as a parent, you as a human being on your journey of growth, development, and as you progress. Also connect with us on all of our social media platforms. We're lit on Instagram. So, check us out on Instagram, storytelling_solutions. Make sure you follow the journey. With that, thank you all so much for being here tonight. I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thank you so much. Give another 7 in the chat to our speakers. Show some love in the chat for our speakers. Thank you so much, speakers, for tuning in and providing immense value tonight. I hope you rest well, knowing that you have helped some individuals. And with that, y'all have a blessed night, and I will see you all very soon. Take care.